Hello everyone, my name is tobyhorrorboy and today we're going to be making Babyface, or Sid's spider baby from Toy Story. As a guy whose hobby is taking apart toys and making them just awful, I've been compared to Sid more times than I can count, and I absolutely take it as a compliment. I've wanted to make Babyface for a few years and I just haven't had the parts I needed until now. I had in my notes to say consider this our Halloween project even though it'll probably be uploaded in November. So it's late February now as I'm recording this very first opening bit. A lot happened, I had to move house, but it's fine, I've got a desk and my craft room is mostly set up. We are so back to our semi-regularly scheduled nonsense is what I'm saying. This is the doll we'll be using for the head. I got her for $2 in an op shop. And I specifically picked her because she has those open and closed eyes that are already the right color. I kept finding dolls that'd be good, but this is the first one I found with blue eyes. To remove her head, normally I'd warm up the plastic with a hairdryer or heat gun, but she's got a bit of give. I wasn't too worried about the plastic breaking, so we push her head to the side and pull it off. Babyface is mostly bald, so we need to get rid of her hair. We start by cutting it pretty short with scissors. If we wanted this project done super quickly, you could dye the hair and be mostly done with the head, but we're not doing that because I've never once done things the easy way. It's a bit hard to see, but there's a head cap that's been glued into the crown of her head, which means there's already a plastic seam here. It's normally covered by her lovely locks, but we can see it with most of the hair gone. To make the hair removal process so much easier, we take a craft knife and cut along the seam, leaving a few centimeters connected at the back. If we weren't cutting into the head cap, you'd ideally be using long-nosed pliers and going in through the neck hole. But I don't have long-nosed pliers, and I feel with how infrequently I customize dolls that the $20 they'd cost could be better used elsewhere. I tried to loosen the hair with a screwdriver and overlocker tweezers, but it just wasn't cutting it. But with the head cap open, we can pull the hair out in rows from the inside much easier. That being said, it still takes a really long time. Most fashion dolls are 1/6 scale, and that is what most people customize. So think Monster High, Barbie, Rainbow High. And those guys have way less hair than Babyface here, and even those are a pain to remove the hair from. Once all of the hair is gone, I did a step that some might call unnecessary. To make the hair follicles more prominent, we take an awl and punch it through each hole. Some of the holes were really tiny, and I feel like the rows of holes have potential to look a bit unsettling. Sorry to anyone watching with trypophobia. When I say that this took a while, I can estimate how long pretty well because I did almost all of it during a game of D&D. Pulling out the hair and punching the holes in took about 7 or 8 hours. If you're in that campaign and could hear the faintest sound of doll eyes jiggling and plastic giving way while my mic was on, I'm so sorry, that was me. The awl got hot really quickly from moving against the plastic, so I managed to burn myself with it a few times. And if you're doing this, please be careful because I drew blood with it twice. Don't ever worry about having texture or visible pores on your face. That's normal, and it is so much worse for Babyface. Now, he still has twice the amount of eyes that he's supposed to, which is really quite excessive of him. So the eye and the blinking mechanism are housed in a pocket of rubber right behind the eye socket. We're gonna take a craft knife and cut around the eye very carefully. Babyface is pretty banged up, but we want the eye socket to be a clean cut. And with a bit of knife wiggling, the eye comes out. The opening and closing mechanism on this was a bit temperamental anyway, but I did actually open it up and fix it. There was a little weight that had slipped out of place. Now that it's working again, I think I'm gonna make it into jewelry. Possibly a necklace, but probably a kind of oversized ring. Do I make a video for that? Maybe. Now this is a bag of Meccano I got from the op shop. I'd been looking for something just like this, but didn't know that Meccano made such big plastic pieces. Meccano to me is small and metal, but there you go. This is presumably what Sid used. Maybe his set also came from the op shop. Thrifty King. We're gonna be using this for his creepy spider legs, and if you're looking at this and thinking, I don't know man, it doesn't look like you're gonna have enough pieces. You are absolutely right, but that is a problem for later. Perhaps even a big problem. Almost a project ruining problem, but we'll get to that. This is all secondhand, so it needs to be washed before we do anything with it. Kitchen sink, warm water, detergent, and a soft toothbrush, let's go. Immediately before I filmed this, I cleaned a pony in here. Coco Pomel, my second favorite character behind Sunburst. So we scrub really thoroughly with the toothbrush to get rid of any dirt. I really like this method for cleaning toys because you can get into any little crevices. And this horrible soup is nothing but crevices as far as the eye can see. We rinse the soap off each piece and leave them on the kitchen bench to dry. I am a valued and liked member of my household. And when everything is 100% dry, we're gonna do a bit of sanding on the head. We use the rotary tool to smooth out the head cap seam because honestly, not the cleanest work I've ever done. Babyface has these very specific flat lips, so we're gonna sand those off. He also has an upturned nose, so we sand off any excess plastic there too. As always, please remember to wear the appropriate PPE and work in a well-ventilated area when sanding or heating foam or plastic. We need to reshape the front bottom half of his head, so we sand that as well to give us a better surface to work with. The head plastic is too smooth, no adhesive or our foam clay will want to stick to that unless we sand it first. And this is our foam clay. It is very lightweight, you sculpt it like clay and then it dries into foam. I love working with it, I just think it's so much fun. But you do need to wait 48 hours for it to dry, so we're starting the face sculpting immediately. I had a few reference images of Babyface's baby face up while doing this to get the proportions right. Most notably, he has very big cheeks that protrude past the sides of his head and a very flat chin with no real jawline. You can add a tiny bit of water to make the foam clay easier to work with, and we do that to help smooth the pieces together and blend them into the rest of his head. We cut the mouth in with a sculpting tool and patch the weird ugly bit on the top of his head because I hate looking at it. This is just the first pass, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Once 48 hours have passed and it's completely dry, we're gonna do some light sanding before patching any weird little gaps or imperfections. We're sanding it by hand with a fine grit sandpaper. I initially made his philtrum and chin too flat so we can bulk those out and redo his mouth. I haven't yet figured out how to make things without shoving my head in front of the camera. Sorry. We blend out the seam between foam and plastic and leave it to dry. When it's next safe to handle, it's time to glue that head cap down. Don't look at any of that silver stuff off to the side. I was working on the legs during our drying time. Do not look at it, that's spoilers. We use an all-purpose glue around the inside of the seam. For added support, we put some glue on the outside as well. And when the glue is dry, we're back to sanding and then sculpting. We start with his lower face and then we're moving on to his head cap. The plan here is just to cover that ugly seam as well as we can with as little clay as we can manage. The head is very flexible and we're going to be bending it into weird shapes to get the hair in later, so we want as few hair follicles impacted as possible. You can see when I'm using the awl that the clay isn't happy, we're just going to avoid putting any hair through the clay ring. There were quite a few more revisions than what I showed here, but I fear that watching me sand and sculpt the same part of his head might get very boring very quickly, so I cut it down. I freed up any clogged hair pores with a sewing pin because it's gentler than the awl, and also definitely the intended use for a sewing pin. We do our final sand of the head and jump over to see what's happening with those spider legs. So off camera, I primed and painted our mechano pieces a nice bright silver. Not sure what bits we're gonna use yet, so I just did all of it. I did try to source more of this same mechano, or at least similar mechano, but I couldn't find any locally, and everything listed on eBay was out of my price range for this project. So I trudged into Bunnings and got a bunch of metal brackets instead. I figured that Sid using a hodgepodge of parts, and some of those parts being kind of sharp metal, was about right anyway. I did some maths that's borderline incomprehensible to me now, so we can start sizing our pieces. The mechano gets cut with our bone scissors, while we can bend the brackets until they snap. Any mechano that was cut to be smaller currently has one rounded end and one end that was haphazardly chopped. We sand down the cut ends with the rotary tool so they match, and we also sand down one side of each bracket piece. The ends of these were a bit curved from being shortened, so we can at least try to bend them back into place with our pliers. And we're doing that largely because the brackets are much thinner than the mechano pieces. To fix that, each bracket segment is going to be 2 brackets glued together with contact cement. We spread contact cement on the rough side of each bracket, wait until it becomes touch dry, and then press the 2 halves together. My favorite adhesive, how I've missed you. Then I had to sit there and pick glue out of the holes so it didn't look horribly messy. The silver spray paint I have is so nice and shiny, and maybe one day I'll use it and leave it like that. But not for Babyface. He's a little dilapidated, perhaps approaching a little rusty. To get that weathered look, we're gonna paint over each individual piece with a black wash, which is just black acrylic paint mixed with some water. Nuts, bolts, leg pieces, that weird rectangular bit that we're gonna use for the body, all of it. I like to leave the wash on there for a bit so the paint has time to set onto it. We dab at it with paper towel to get rid of the excess, which is most of it. And we do 2 coats to make it look sufficiently grungy. I did a cheeky spray clear coat outside to seal the paint. Let's assemble some legs. Just some gentle leg construction on this beautiful day. To keep things simple, we're gonna say that Babyface has 6 legs and 2 arms, the arms being the ones with the claws. So his legs are each made up of 3 segments, 2 long and 1 short one at the end. and we can start screwing the segments together. This is really simple with the Mechano because it's a kid's toy and that's its singular function. But we have the metal brackets as well, and the Mechano pieces are way too big to fit the brackets. Stylistically, I really liked the look of the oversized Mechano nuts, so I wanted to have them on every joint, including on the brackets. But this project just didn't want to be, probably because no one should ever combine the materials that I've combined here. To do that, we have to sand the nut hole bigger for some of our nuts so that they'll fit over the metal nuts and at the end of the bolts. What am I even saying? This was incredibly frustrating and also the worst, and I would never recommend it to anyone. Yes, this is still cheaper than buying more Mechano. Yes, I should have just bit the bullet and been financially miserable instead. This made me become the Joker, and that's why I'm not wearing gloves. If you're ever thinking about making Babyface, please promise me that you won't do this. You'll be sensible and normal. And if that wasn't enough, I had to cut the bolts shorter because they were comically long and it was going to interfere with the leg placement later, and they were the only ones they had that'd fit. Anyway, we screw the pieces together as best as we can for now, mixing the two sets to be vaguely aesthetically pleasing. And we make what I can only call the hip joints while we're here, with the brackets cut to be 2 holes long. We use the cutting head on the rotary tool to make a notch that goes halfway through the piece, and we're gonna make 8 of these. Now we can take our pliers and bend them into shape, with 4 going one way and 4 going the opposite way. Okay, let's jump back over because I need to stab something in the head with a needle hundreds of times, not that we're even up to that yet. To get him ready for painting, we prime him with 4 to 5 coats of Mod Podge mixed with water. When it's dry, we can start putting down something vaguely the right color. I am truly not very good at mixing paint. I don't understand color theory, and a color wheel is something that could be so frightening to me. So you may notice that whenever I paint something, I do a base coat in a color that's completely off, but kind of in the right color family. This is because I don't want to run out of the actual color we're using, because who knows what'll happen if I have to mix more of it up. The eyelashes were very much in the way, so unfortunately they had to go with pliers. We do 2 coats of our final color. I bought most of the paints used to mix this color for a cosplay a few years ago, so it's reasonably nice quality and not like 20 years old like some of my other paint. When we're happy with the coverage, we can pencil in where we want his eyebrows to be and paint them on so carefully. I like to use a damp Q-tip to remove any acrylic paint mistakes as soon as they happen. And remember, they're sisters, not twins. There's a point with every project that I've done where it stops looking like a foam abomination and starts being recognizably something. And I feel like for Babyface, it's right here. We paint the eyebrows on and it's like, there's that little freak from Toy Story. Finally, we can do a coat of watered down Mod Podge to seal the paint. Okay, it's hair time. I don't know where this bag of wefts came from, but it was in my wig stash, and as you can see, it's clearly perfect and not messy or disgusting in any way. Look, I need to preface this section by saying that we're in a cost of living crisis. It's like the Rolling Stones once said, you can't always get what you want. They were talking about me not having any rerouting tools. So we're using what I have in my house and the knot method demonstrated in this tutorial by My Little Custom. That's not the method typically used, but it's what we'll be doing because we have $3, a bag of hair, and a dream. Let's go. Also, most other methods involve coating the inner head with glue at the end, and our little man has an empty eye socket. Possible glue seepage and it'll be visible through the socket? I think not. So, we start by threading a section of hair onto a relatively big sewing needle. The best way to thread a needle is to wet the end of the thread, or in this case the hair, to stiffen it and keep it together. So, of course, this mystery wig ended up in my mouth repeatedly. We stretch the hole with the awl, and I'm going to get so demonetized and put the needle through the hole and use the end of our needle nose pliers to shove it through. Then we reach around inside the head to find the needle and pull it out through the neck hole. Now we unthread the needle, tie off the knot a few times, add a dab of our all-purpose glue, and pull the hair until the knot is sitting against the inner head. Rinse and repeat for so long. I could not tell you how long this took me. I've blocked it from my memory. I had my needle and my hair. Star Trek the animated series was auto-playing on my iPad. It was all happening. The hardest part of this was not being able to reach the needle to grab it from inside the head. It was so much easier to do the venting towards the bottom of the head, but that is not where the majority of his hair is. I ended up swapping to a darning needle because it was a fair bit longer, but it was also thicker and therefore harder to push through. The long hair was a bit unmanageable, so we cut it shorter to get it out of the way, still leaving it much longer than it needs to be. Also, just as a heads up, I have some scratches on my arms that don't look great and they're visible in parts of this video. I'm letting you all know now that they're from my victorious battle against the blackberry plant at our previous house. We had just like a regular house inspection, the yard and everything looked so good, and then they gave us notice to vacate anyway. I destroyed so much blackberry and it is covered in thorns. I had mozzie bites so bad that I had to go to the doctor to get steroids and I was covered in scratches and bruises. It's lucky that you can only see my forearms in these videos. But back to it, after a million billion hours, his hair has been adequately rooted. It was generally pretty knotted and messy, and that's not what we're after, so we brush what's left of it out. Now we can go in with scissors and cut away all of our hard work. Babyface's hair is really short, but the same number of follicles had to be filled regardless of hair length. It feels absolutely wretched cutting off 95% of the length, but that's what he looks like. We trim it very short, but with some variation in the length. This bit is kind of just vibes based. Unfortunately, during the whole hair process, I managed to crack some of the paint because of course I did. But don't fret, I can fix it. We use painter's tape to protect the hair immediately under the seam and do a good 2 coats of paint over any problem areas. And so it's not a different finish to the rest of his head, we do a layer of watered down Mod Podge. I was absolutely dead set on getting those holes as prominent as possible, so alas, I stuck them all with the awl again. Even just watching this footage back, I'm asking myself why I couldn't have picked literally any other hobby. I feel insane. It might be time to get back into cosplay as well. No, but seriously, I love this weird little hobby, and if you're watching my videos, then I love you, and I wouldn't change any of this for anything. Not even for not having to stab hundreds of holes into a doll head and having my craft room covered in tiny bits of wig hair. If you can believe it, we're still not done with the hair, but this is the final step. There are strands, and they're just pointing in any which way, and I hate them. We spritz a small area with hairspray and then pull each little clump together. It's okay to have a few hairs out of place, but the way that so many of them were just everywhere really bothered me. And as we go, we can trim down any weird long bits and just make any final adjustments. If you've used hairspray before, you'll know how sticky it is when it's wet and on your skin, a truly horrible sensory experience. But look at how much better that looks. The head is technically still not done, but we're gonna jump over to his horrible spider legs. And I am the man for the job. I know what spiders look like, I'm Australian. But this was an absolute mess. So, starting off, we had too many Meccano bolts and not enough Meccano nuts. But what is a nut, if not a bolt with the screw bit cut off and the inside hollowed out? We cut partially through some of the bolts with the rotary tool and then cut the rest of the way with our bone scissors. Then we use a diamond grinder attachment on the rotary tool to carve out the inside. You can tell it's serious because I have my really banged up cutting mat out and not my nice one. It has to be the perfect size to cover the metal nuts. If it's too small, it won't fit, and if it's too big, the glue won't have both surfaces to stick to. The nuts that were bolts need to be repainted because they're so bright yellow in places, so we do 2 coats of silver spray paint. Then we can go back in and darken them with a black wash. And also this one leg, apparently. Not sure why that's there, but it is. Anywhere that's joining a metal segment to either another metal segment or a Meccano segment needs to use the metal bolts, with the Meccano nuts on top, because the Meccano bolt is much thicker and won't fit through the hole in the metal. So we're gonna start constructing his leggies, and we plan out the formation for each one before doing anything permanent. Unfortunately, I like the mismatched look, which means extra gluing on fake nuts, which we do with the weird evil super glue that I scavenged from my dad's shed. We have legs, but they're disembodied. The piece we're going to use for the body isn't accurate. His body is meant to be a square, and this is very much a rectangle. But it looks cool, and I like it, and want to use this piece, so onward we go. Much like you or I, his legs are going to attach through the humble hip joint, which is a metal piece 2 holes long with a slit in the middle and one side twisted. There are already holes on the body for us to use, but we need to widen the smaller ones with the rotary tool's diamond head so we can fit the bolt inside. The hip joint doesn't quite fit where it needs needs to because the wall of the body is so close to the hole, so we reshape the body side of the hip joint to curve it. Now, we have to angle the front and back legs out or they're going to be way too close together. And we can do that by angling part of the hip joint with pliers. We do the 4 corner pieces first because the middle pieces have to work with the much larger holes. Obviously the nut isn't going to hold the joining piece on because the hole is so big, so we're going to wedge the middle hip joint in between the body and the hip joints on either side. So the middle hip joint is being held in place by the nut, and also tension, and also a secret third thing. Super glue. Then we can put our front hip joints in for his little armsies. I know I've said this before, but this was honestly such a pain. The metal parts are heavy and they're not compatible with the Mechano without significant work, and even then it's debatable. I really can't stress enough how absolutely hellish this was. I'm never doing this again. No one should ever do this. If you're thinking about combining Mechano and metal to create Metal-No, do not. That's the devil talking. Sometimes you need to spend money on a project, and that's okay. Guys, let's never do this again. But what we are gonna do is put those legs on. I ran out of bolts and had to do a cheeky Bunnings run to buy more. And what a great time to run out, because Bunnings had shorter ones, so we don't have to cut these down. We very slightly enlarge the joining holes on the metal legs with the rotary tool to give us a bit more wiggle room. Then we can thread the bolt on, going front to back and secure it with a nut. We repeat that for every leg that starts with a metal piece. The process for gluing on any leg starting with a Mechano piece is a bit different. Those pieces aren't going to be able to move at that joint, because in order to get the leg to stay up in any kind of upright position, we need to superglue the joint in place. Which is sort of the culmination of why I should have just waited and bought more Mechano. Not my finest moment. At this point, I was just hoping that he'd turn out looking okay. We squidge up any excess superglue with a Q-tip. Once his legs are secured, we can glue on any fake nuts that we missed earlier. Recording this audio half a year after finishing Babyface, I couldn't tell you why some of them were missed, but they sure were. Now we can do paint patrol with a tiny amount of silver paint on our brush, just to catch any brightly colored plastic that might be peeking out. We also dry brush some black paint onto anywhere that's looking a bit too clean. I make my fair share of FNAF animatronics, and so many of those are old and a bit gross looking, so I'm used to doing silver, black, and then 2 rust colors to tie it all together. But Babyface simply isn't rusty, so I had to refrain. I distinctly remember thinking, so it's just the finishing touches on the head and he's done. Cool, I can start on that Tattletail soon. His claws, bro, you forgot his claws. So now we're gonna put in an end cap for his neck by gluing in a piece of EVA foam. That's so that his neck can swivel from side to side rather than have his head loll around of its own accord. Every cosplayer has at least 1 pack of Daiso false eyelashes in the back of their bathroom cupboard. And if you're a cosplayer and you don't, just wait, it'll happen to you too. But I don't need these, and if I haven't opened them in the last 10 years, I don't think I'll need them for my own eyes anytime soon. So we're gonna cut them down to fit Babyface's little baby eyelids. They also need to be much shorter and blunter. Using Daiso lashes for dolls is a well-established thing in the ball-jointed doll community, and this is not my first time gluing lashes to a doll. We do a line of PVA on the lashes and hold them on until they stick. This clip is so silly because I'm trying to show you how they look when the eye opens and closes, but with the camera directly above him, you can't really see. I had a good view though, and I think it looks great. Go team. Okay, his claws. They're an unforgettable part of his design, but here I am forgetting them anyway. Sometimes I amaze even myself. We pattern them and cut them out of our nice, high-density foam. Important pieces like this get the good quality foam, while everything that you won't see gets made out of foam floor mats. We've got one claw that's kind of like 2 brackets, and then another one that's more like if a crab was really evil and metal. We sand down the edges with the rotary tool to smooth them out, and to bevel the sides for a bit of extra dimension. Well, dimension on the bracket claw, and the illusion of sharpness on the evil crab claw. We can trim off any weird bits with a pair of tiny scissors. I didn't want to use my giant bone scissors, and other than my fabric scissors that are for fabric only, these were genuinely the only other ones I could find. Shout out to my dad's Swiss Army knife. We go back in with the rotary tool just to make sure that everything is nice and smooth. Then we can heat seal our foam with the heat gun. That'll just harden it a bit and help it take paint better because the foam won't be as porous. The claws hinge on a bolt, so we mark each piece by pressing a mechano bolt into where we want them to open from. I find it a bit fiddly to cut small circles into foam, so we're gonna hollow that out with a drill bit on the rotary tool. Then we can sand the holes, and they're mostly circular. Now we can heat seal the holes as well. To get them well and truly ready for painting, we do 3 to 4 coats of watered down Mod Podge, letting them completely dry in between each coat. We spray paint them silver outside, and of course do a black wash to match the rest of him. Our arms are going to attach to the outside of the shoulder connectors, just to give them a bit more space. At this point, I was completely out of the mechano nuts, but we do have these larger ones that are way too big for the thread that we have in this set. Because we didn't, for even one moment, start this project with enough materials. But we are going to make them fit. And we do that by using contact cement to glue a strip of craft foam to the inside of the nuts. Now it sits flush, so we can super glue it onto the bolt holding the claws in place. Finally, we can super glue the shoulder bolts on to attach the arms, propping them up in the process. Welcome to the Q-tips I use for removing paint and the vitamin D I use for being a vampire. Only, I guess that's not finally, because this is finally. The absolute very last thing we have to do is make the neck swivel joint. We cut down a piece of wooden dowel that I scavenged from my dad's shed and sand the end down so it'll fit into the center hole of the body. We cut a circle just big enough for the other end of the dowel into the base of the head and round it out with the rotary tool. Then we use contact cement to glue the smaller end of the dowel into his body. The idea is that his head can be rotated to look around like he does in the movie. Nothing electronic here. Remember when this was going to be quick and easy? And that's it. To be brutally honest, but also not to get too into it, I've not been doing great. This year has been a lot. My dad was incredibly sick and was hospitalized, and I really thought that that was it. But he's recovered and he's doing much better now. Also, like 10 other things happened, including me chipping my front tooth 2 days ago, but that's the main thing. I was also really unsure about this whole project, so I was procrastinating on making this video because I couldn't get past it not being very good. As they say, I renewed my Mega Depression Plus subscription. I ended up in this hell spiral of not making anything because I wanted to finish this video, but I was too ashamed to actually work on it to post it. The first half of this year has been me in low power mode putting all of my energy into surviving. Apparently, when I get stressed, I rewatch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, so my partner is now a JoJo fan. But more than anything, I just wanted to get back to making stuff with you guys. So here I am. I'm back. I'm sorry for my absence, but I'm back and I'm beyond excited to get to those next animatronics. I have big plans, many of them. Ambitious plans. Tattletail, My Little Amnesia, Dark Deception, more FNAF as always, perhaps the Walton Files as a little treat. If you've watched this far, thank you for sticking with me. I love you. And thank you so much for watching. Here he is.